This episode is brought to you by Sabio, the #1 coding bootcamp for veterans. Visit sabio.la/military to learn more. And welcome to Military Matters. I'm Rod Rodriguez. One of the best parts of hosting a military-centric podcast is that I get to meet and talk with some of the most interesting people in the military and possibly in the world. So when the opportunity to talk with a Navy SEAL astronaut presented itself, I couldn't say no. Chris Cassidy retired from the U.S. Navy last year after achieving the rank of captain. That's an 06 for my Army and Marine listeners. Not content to just being a Navy SEAL, Chris also has the distinction of being a NASA astronaut, has been in space several times, and was the central feature of the Disney Plus docuseries Among the Stars. Now, for normal people, that might be considered enough. But now Chris has taken on a new challenge as president and CEO of the National Medal of Honor Museum, which is currently raising funds in hopes of building this museum in Arlington, Texas. Now, I'm stoked to be able to share this interview with you, my conversation with Chris Cassidy, Navy SEAL, astronaut, and supporter of our nation's Medal of Honor awardees. Chris, it's an amazing career that you've had so far, an amazing life. I'd like to go back very quickly to how it all began. I mean, what did a young Chris Cassidy want to be when he grew up?
I loved sports growing up, and I was okay at them, but I realized that I was never going to be a pro athlete. I loved basketball. At one point, I thought, it'd be great to play sports as long as I can. But then I had a high school coach that said, 1% of high school athletes play at Division I college, and 1% of those Division I athletes make it to the professional. So with that comment, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be a basketball referee. So that's what I wanted to be, was a professional basketball referee in high school. But paying for school was a thing for me. I had to figure out how to do that. And in exploring those options is when I learned about the service academies, and that it's free to go there. You have to pay back that education with time in the military, which I was totally fine with. But as I was telling you before the show, I had no idea about Navy SEALs. I knew about astronauts, but in my mind, that's what other people do, not something that I could do, little old guy from Maine. But Navy SEALs or in the 1980s, it was not like it is today where everybody knows about Navy SEALs. It was not the case. So I was just looking for school. But to fast forward to today, everything I've been able to experience in life professionally is 100% because of the Navy opportunities that the Navy has given me. And it all started with a little bit of curiosity about how to pay for school in the service academies.
So you were this kid, you wanted to be a basketball referee. That big movie didn't come out till I think late 80s, early 90s with Charlie Sheen and, jumping off the bridge and this kind of stuff. Was this already kind of in the back of your mind, or were you still like, I'm going to be in the Navy and I'm going to do Navy officer stuff?
Yeah, when I got to the Naval Academy, I just thought, so you're obligated to serve 5 years after school. And I thought I'd just do my 5 and then get out and I don't know what it would be after that, but I did not expect to stay for a full career. It wasn't that I was against it. I just didn't see myself in that light. Now here I am, 28 years of service, and I just retired last year. Totally unexpected. But I do want to share the story of how I got into the academy real quick. So some folks might be aware, but it's all service academies, 2-part process, to the school itself and to a congressional office or a senator in your state. And I didn't have anybody guiding me in this process, but I did read that you had to apply to the congressman So I did that. I went for the interview in my state capital, Augusta, Maine, and the staff person said, "Okay, good job. We got you from here. We'll take care of it." They sent that, and so I said, "Okay, I'm good." And she said, "Yeah, we'll take care of sending everything to the Naval Academy." So I walked away thinking I was done. That was the fall of my senior year. The spring of my senior year, everybody's finding out if they're into schools or not, and I was finding out from other schools, but not the Naval Academy. And so finally, I couldn't take it any longer, and I picked up the phone and called the admissions office, and the lady answers, and she said, "Hi, yeah, oh, okay, I can help you. What's your name?" I tell her. I hear her rummaging through files. "Can you spell your name?" More files. Interesting. "What's your social security number?" I tell her, rummaging more files. "I'm sorry, we have nothing on you. We don't know who you are. You didn't apply." And like, oh my gosh. So just as luck would have it, my good friend and I had planned to join his dad on a business trip the next week, which was our spring vacation from Maine to Washington, D.C. We were going to do Washington, D.C. sightseeing stuff. And so like an 8-hour drive. So we did this. The only exception now was I took an afternoon and drove from Washington to Annapolis, like a 30-minute trip, and went into talk to the admissions lady of the office. And I walk in and she said, "Oh yeah, you're the young guy from New England. You got to see Marine Corps Captain Malillo. He's our New England admissions counselor. Down the hall, third door on the right. Can't miss him. You'll see him." So I walked down the hall, I turned the corner, and you know, Rod, what a stereotypical Marine in dress uniform looks like. And bam, that's what I had in front of my face. Shoes you could see your reflection in, perfect uniform, like gig line straight, physically fit, square jaw, haircut, the whole 9 yards. And like, oh, I've never seen a person like this before. So I'm thinking in my head. And but I knew that was the person I had to tell my story to. So I tell him, and he kind of nods and goes, "Okay, I'll get back to you." Total time on target was like 4 or 5 minutes in his office, and that's it. And he dismissed me. I thought, well, the Naval Academy is not in my future. And this is what I'm thinking my whole way back to my hometown. At least I tried, but now I know I can move on to some other plan B and figure that out. Well, a couple days later, I'm in class and I get paged to the main office for a phone call. And I pick up the phone and he goes, "Hey, Cassidy, it's Captain Malillo. I got news for you. I can get you into the Naval Academy prep school, but you need to tell me right now on the phone if you're in or not." And I didn't know what the prep school was, where it was, what the time commitment meant, but I knew it was my opportunity. So yes, sir, I'll take it. So I share that story because my interaction with Captain Malillo, who I never saw again, was 4 or 5 minutes, but yet he gave me a gift that changed my life. Like if it wasn't for him and allowing me to go to the Naval Academy prep school is 1 year in Newport, Rhode Island. If you maintain certain grades, you automatically go to the academy. And that's the path I went. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have learned about the SEAL teams. And if it wasn't for being in the SEAL teams, I don't think I would have I wouldn't have learned about astronauts as a possibility, I don't think, and I wouldn't have been an effective applicant. And so all of that was because Captain Malillo gave me this amazing gift. And I think that why I feel so passionately about that story now is that any one of us can be Captain Malillo at any given time, or we might interact. The listeners might have their own story, a version of their Captain Malillo. And it's so important. Life is full of those unexpected twists and turns. And a moment in time could be a fundamental juncture in your life.
That's so powerful. It's that influence we have on another person's life by giving them 5 minutes of our attention and doing something about it. You know, a lot of people will say, "Oh, let me get to that." You know, how many emails have we just kind of like, "Oh, yeah, I'll get to that eventually. I'll get to that eventually." But here's this young man walking into an office. That captain doesn't know you from Adam, and you're just like, "Hey, I need your help." And talk about that professionalism, right? That Marine Corps officer who's like, "Oh, you have a problem. I can fix this. Let's go." But I love the fact that he called you and he lays it out like you started your naval career with urgency, right? Are
Mm-hmm.
you in or out, Cassidy? I need to know now. I'm on the phone. You're like, I don't know what that even means.
Right. Yeah.
What were some of the first things that kind of that you became aware of the SEALs, and what was your first initial impression about them?
Yeah. So at the NAPS, Naval Academy Prep School, Newport, Rhode Island, the that building is adjacent to Officer Candidate School. And so at OCS, there's all kinds of folks who are enlisted and now getting their commission coming through. And I remember standing in the chow hall line and saw a couple of guys that were really fit and just carried themselves different. And they had a different looking pin on their chest. And I had never seen the SEAL pin before. And I remember doing a double take, like, what the heck is that? That person, that pin, like what's going on there? And that was probably early in my prep school year. And then I learned a little bit more about it. And I think I even talked to one of those guys in the chow hall at some point in the year and became a little bit more intrigued and kind of like, ooh, wow, do I have what it takes to do that? I don't know. I'm not sure. I love the water. I grew up in a coastal town in Maine. There was no surfing there because there was no waves, but I always loved the water. My school did not have a swim team, but I loved swimming. So when I got to Annapolis the following year, what they do well there is expose you to all the different communities that you can do in the military. I think West Point and Air Force, same thing. But in the Navy specifically, there's staff members from the submarine community, aviation community, surface community, SEAL teams, EOD, across the board, so that students can make an educated decision on where they see themselves fitting. And I started to do the morning workouts in the SEAL with the SEAL guys, and just kind of got the bug, got motivated, and as the years progressed, I became more and more serious about it.
So you became more and more serious about it. I'm sure you had some conversations with these SEALs, like, what does it take to get there? What's this like? What can I expect if I go to Buds? There's a big difference between knowing about something and then finding yourself in the middle of it. Take me into this, your experience with Buds. I mean, you're this young man. Were you still in the academy, or had you graduated at that point?
No, as soon as you graduate, you start your training. So I graduated, had like a month of vacation, and then went to SEAL training. So you're right. I'm a young man, brand new ensign, and there I am in it. Yeah.
So take me into that. And a young ensign, Cassidy. You've heard about the SEALs. You've been training. You've been working with them a little bit, getting yourself physically, mentally prepared. But now you're there. It's the real deal. And this is, again, before a lot of the public exposure to the SEALs. So you were very much, it sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like you were very much still in the dark about what was about to happen, what you were getting yourself into.
Well, I had a little bit of insight because in the summers of one of your years at the academy, you spend a month. If you want to be a SEAL, you spend a month at Bud. So I had a little bit of exposure to what the pace of life would be like as a Bud student. But just as you said, Rod, you don't really know until you're holding that log over your head. And what I remember, there's a couple key things that are important. What I remember is showing up on the first day or like the day before class up, like on a Sunday when everybody's gathering together to get the word on what Monday will be like. I remember being intimidated by some people and not intimidated by others, and thinking, okay, well, that person is similar to my size and build, and we'll probably. But looking back, I was wrong on all of it. And because what is so important about SEAL training, I think military training in general, it's all hard, but it's not so much the physical part. It's what you have in your heart and your brain that gets you through it. And when you just look and try to make a book cover assessment of somebody, you can't see inside their heart or their brain. And so that was one of the huge lessons for me. It is really about effort and desire and firing your gut and the will be a good teammate. And all of that is what Buds and the instructors, their job is, and I think this is true in much of our military training, but their job is to push you to the point where it's your edge, either physically or mentally or both. Sometimes those edges are in different places. And that you realize that you don't get through it alone. You get through it with the person, your teammate on the left or right of you. Some days you're helping them, some days they're helping you, and just grinding through it. And you can do it. And that's what SEAL training was all about.
Going back to school after military service can be challenging. It can take years to get a college degree and find a new full-time job. That's why I want you to know about Sabio, the coding bootcamp and developer community that's helped so many veterans become successful software engineers. In just 17 weeks of remote learning, Sabio gives you the skills and real-life experience to start a high-paying tech job. Visit sabio.la/military to learn how you can use your VA benefits to enroll. That's Sabio, sabio.la/military to learn more. Looking back at your career as a SEAL, are there any highlights that stand out to you as pivotal moments that might have changed the way that you viewed your life, your career, or anything that kind of stands out to you as like, this is a moment that maybe changed the trajectory of who I am?
I was a brand new ensign, and I completed SEAL training. I earned my SEAL pin. I was on my first SEAL platoon, and we were overseas on a submarine. And my job was to kind of like, I was called the dry deck shelter officer. I was the SEAL that was the liaison between the submarine and the SEAL operations. And the submarines are small, but there sometimes can be a communication gap. And where the SEALs my teammates were all getting gear on down in the torpedo room, and I was kind of going back and forth between the torpedo room and the conning tower. And the submarine had information about when the mission was going to need to be slid right by an hour or canceled, but that the team didn't know. And it's a small little thing, but I was this one element of liaison and communication, basically is what I'm getting at, between one element of the ship and the other. And it was this really small moment, but I remember lying my head on the pillow after the operation was over thinking, how fundamental is communication? Like, if there wasn't, it just happened to be me. I wasn't this magical person, but I happened to be the link in the chain connecting these two pieces that were diverging in because they didn't have the same information. So that was one kind of piece that I've always carried with me throughout the rest of my military career and now my civilian life, is that all members of the team need to have the same information. Otherwise, you're going to start diverging. And then on the leadership front, there was one particular time. So it's sort of a long story, but I won't go into all the details. But the bottom line is, my commander in Afghanistan, a Navy SEAL captain, I was a lieutenant, young junior officer. He hammered home to me in a unique. We happened to be on the bathroom. We were right next to each other on the toilet. But he hammered home to me the reason I was getting a paycheck from the United States government that day was not to shoot my gun perfect, to do a whole bunch of push-ups and pull-ups. It was to be a leader and make good decisions and bring the guys home safely, execute the commander's intent. And I had heard that lesson in all phases of my life, but at that moment when we were about to board a helicopter to go do a mission, and here he and I are alone, nobody else around, and it really sunk into me like, man, there's nothing more important than making good decisions and doing right by the organization. And that's true as a civilian or in the military, right? Like, the reason we get paid in our civilian lives is to do right for the company.
during your time in the SEALs, is this about the time you were exposed to options to work with NASA or to become an astronaut? How did that come into your periphery after being a SEAL?
So there's I was the second Navy SEAL to become an astronaut. The first one to do that was a gentleman named Bill Shepard, about 20 years older than me. And I was a young SEAL officer, in fact, just coming out of my first couple deployments. This was prior to 9/11. And I was going to graduate school. And I learned that Bill Shepard had been to MIT at that same department I was, and we met each other somehow. And he answered my phone call, and oh, and I know what it was. I just finished MIT, and I was driving out to San Diego for my next duty station, and we were in Houston. And I called him and explained who I was, and he was gracious enough to meet me for after work beer, and in doing so, he clued me in. Because exactly like you just asked, I didn't know how you become an astronaut, and I didn't know if you have to be a Navy pilot or what's the deal. And he educated me like, no, we select astronauts about every 4 years. You can be from any background, military, civilian, pilot, non-pilot, doesn't matter. You just have to have a college degree and you got to be a U.S. citizen. I had both of those checks, and so it kind of became a little bit of a curiosity thing, like. I love the SEAL teams. Why don't I just try for astronauts? If they pick me, amazing. If they don't, that's fine. I love what I'm doing. And I applied one time for the astronaut class of 2000, and I wasn't given an interview. 4 years later, I completed graduate school. I had experience in Afghanistan, and I was a much more well-rounded applicant. And that's when I got selected.
What was that like being selected for this program? This is something. I mean, I think you've probably heard this before in your description and describing you. 1% of 1% of 1%, but to be selected for this very prestigious program to become a United States astronaut, what were you thinking when you got that call and they're like, you're in? Or was it another one of those like, we need to know, are you in or out?
Well, they did ask me that. It's kind of funny. So I went, so the process is long and extensive and it involves an interview that's physically in person at a week in Houston, and much of that is medical. And I did that interview, and then the very next week I deployed to Afghanistan. So I was gone for 6 months. I got an email that said, hey, please call the astronaut selection office. This is like in April or May, 6 months later. Said, please call the astronaut selection office on Monday. Well, I had just because they knew I was overseas. I just happened to return home to Virginia that weekend. So on Monday, I'm in my kitchen at home, and I get the call, and the gouge is, if it's the head of human resources that calls you, you're not going to be an astronaut. If it's the chief astronaut who calls you, it's a good sign. So I answer, and it's the chief astronaut, and he said, hey, Chris, this is Kent Rominger. I'm just wondering if you still like to come work with us at NASA. And I was like, yeah, I'm good. No, I said, yes, absolutely. And keep in mind, Rod, this is the second phone call that now has changed my life. The first one allowed me to be at the Naval Academy. The second one, now I'm shifting focus and moving down to Houston to become a NASA astronaut. And I remember coming to my first astronaut Monday morning meetings are no different than any other organization. People come in, there's kind of a boring meeting, talk about stuff, and then everybody disappears. I remember walking into my first astronaut Monday morning meeting. There was John Young, and there's all those people that I read about on previous space flight. And I had this kind of imposter feeling, like, what in the hell am I doing here? Am I in the wrong room? Like, I don't belong in this room. And it was very, very humbling, and to realize that I'm going to be part of this club.
So what was your role there? You're not a Navy pilot. You're a Navy SEAL with extensive experience in the field. You've been on multiple missions. What was your job with the NASA and as an astronaut?
So initially, you're an astronaut candidate. So NASA has acronyms for everything, and astronaut candidate is shortened to ASCAN. So there's a little bit of a motivation to study hard and not be that for very long. But you're an ASCAN for 2 years, and it's really like graduate school for space operations, because the class comes together from all different walks of life, all different experiences, some military, some not, some pilots, some not, some teachers, some physicists, some, everybody has a different experience base of operating, and in the military, just so happens, it's very fundamental to who we are, is operating. We all have a different version of it depending on your MOS, but effectively you're conducting a mission, you're communicating to each other, you're communicating on the radio, you're taking information from the terrain, the enemy, and pulling that into a plan, deciding with your chain of command, and then doing it. And it's very similar to space flight. The enemy is not carrying guns, the enemy is the environment and machinery that wants to break. But it's the same kind of thing. And so those first 2 years are just exposing you to all of the things that will make you an effective crew member, to include learning the systems, learning the space shuttle, learning the space station, and how to maintain it and operate it. And then you kind of get in line to be assigned to a mission. So I got selected in 2004, finished astronaut candidate training in 2006. And my first mission was not until 3 years later in 2009. So in those 3 years, you support ongoing missions. I worked in mission control as a capsule communicator called Capcom, worked helping a variety of things to kind of build your experience, kind of like in the military. If you go to different schools, you might deploy for a couple of weeks to watch some other unit. All of it makes you more experienced and better value to your unit when you come back. And then so I did my first mission in 2009 on a space shuttle, and then a couple flights after that over the ensuing years.
I want to take you to your first flight. This is a high stress situation. I have no doubt. I mean, there's no way you're going to strap somebody to the top of a shuttle, a rocket, and get jettisoned into space. It seems like stress and fear have had a place in your life that have helped build you from, the stress and fear of, everything from the academy to buds to your naval career. Now you're strapped to a chair, ready to jettison into space. This is your first mission. Can you tell me a little bit about how you deal with stress? How do you deal with fear, and what was going through your mind as that countdown started going?
Yeah, I think, Rod, that fear is magnified. So fear is not a bad thing. Fear is a signal, right? It's a signal to you that, hey, you ought to be paying attention right now and try to control the things you control. But it's also heightened by uncertainty. And how do you mitigate uncertainty? It's with prior experiences or with training. And that's why in the military we train so much. And you can never train for exactly the scenario that you're going to encounter. It's always going to be slightly different. But the more repetitions in training, the more variety of scenarios that you do, that you build this foundational base that as an individual and as a unit, you can deviate from when the reality happens, and you're much more confident. And that's the case with spaceflight. We do a lot of training, so you feel pretty confident in your own abilities and your crew's abilities to overcome malfunctions with a computer, malfunctions with an engine, whatever. But there's this whole uncertain component that's heightened on your first mission. And for me, that was the case. The bus, you go from the suit room, you've probably seen pictures of astronauts waving as they're about to board a bus. You get on that bus and you drive for 25 minutes out to the launch pad, and then the doors open and you just look up to the sky and you see this spaceship up there. The rocket is full of fuel. The whole metal structure is moaning and groaning because temperature extremes are so significant, and you see steam and smoke and ice, and you just can sense how much energy is in that thing. And you get in the elevator, you climb up, and that whole time you're thinking, wow, I'm like we're really doing it. Today is launch day. And there's just so many emotions. As soon as the rocket lights, though, you kind of focused in on what you're doing. And for me anyways, it was easy to compartmentalize that fear. And then the rocket cuts off and you're safely in orbit. And it's like, whoa, we just did that. We just rode an explosion from the surface of the Earth to outer space.
How many missions in space did you do?
I've launched 3 times, once on a shuttle and twice on a Russian Soyuz. Total time up there about a year of my life.
That's like a deployment. That for the conventional military forces, that's like one of our deployments. During your time in space, going back and forth in these 3 missions, is there any experience that you can relate to the audience of some uncertainty, something that you thought, I'm 1,000 miles from home. Like, I can see the Earth. It is you. It is your team. It is the people to your left and to your right. Very much like the SEAL teams, where you had to overcome some type of adversity.
Yeah, the best example I can think of was on a particular spacewalk where my partner's spacesuit was malfunctioning and water was leaking into his helmet. And that could be a whole another hour conversation, but the long and short of it is, water's not supposed to be inside your spacesuit. And it was covering his head and covering his ears. It got in his eyes and his nose and in and out of his mouth. And the only way to get rid of it is to take the helmet off, but you can't take the helmet off outside, or the water is not your problem anymore. So you got to get back inside. You got to close the hatch. You got to start repressurization and get to the point where you can have a safe environment around you to get the helmet off. And that whole experience was an intense one. It started, the onset was about 45 minutes into a 6.5-hour spacewalk. And over the course of the next 45 minutes, we went from, oh, this is a little bit inconvenient, to, holy crap, Luca is going to drown in his helmet if we don't get back inside. And there was a lot of lessons learned from the 2 of us as spacewalkers, as well as the ground team in Houston who were managing it. The biggest thing is, without going into the full brief, there were little teeny indications throughout the course of the early part of the spacewalk that something wasn't quite right. But each in and of itself was kind of insignificant. But when you add it all up, in retrospect, hey, the system was talking to us. Maybe we should do something. Maybe in a helicopter pilot, a slow drip of hydraulic fluid's not a bad thing, but the drip, all of a sudden the drip rate increased. There's a new vibration. There's some other seemingly not so big deal thing. When you add it all up, hey, you're about to bust a whole hydraulic system, and that was the case for us.
Did that experience make you a little more sensitive to how big things can start small?
It makes me, yeah, exactly. And that things never get super good really fast, but they sure get super bad really fast. And it also made me more appreciative of gut feeling. Like, for us, the data on the suit all was normal. And the engineers down on the ground, they're like, well, everything we're seeing in our technical ones and zeros is all normal. The suit is functioning fine. But yet we knew, our gut was saying, this is not right. And so it made me more appreciative of, if your gut is telling you something, you're probably right.
You said you recently retired. How long did you serve? And you're just retired from the Navy. What are you doing now?
So I retired last summer from 28 years in the Navy, a little people don't often know, but when you become an astronaut, if you're military, it becomes your duty station. You still get you stay in my case, the Navy. My paycheck was still from the Navy. I still had to do semi-annual PT tests and performance reports and all that stuff. And now my pension is through the Navy as well. So the first 11 of those 28 years were in the SEAL teams. The last 17, I was a NASA astronaut. And so after I retired from the Navy and from NASA, I accepted a job at the National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation. I'm a president now doing that. We're building a museum for Medal of Honor recipients in the Dallas area, Arlington, Texas, right near the AT&T Cowboy Stadium, and a monument on the National Mall in DC, and a leadership institute. So that's the project I'm involved with. What I love about it is, the missing piece when you retire from the military, and everybody that's done it, you probably have a similar story, but that sense of service, that sense of unit, cohesion, and camaraderie that oftentimes can be missed when you move on to the civilian world. And some organizations can replicate it, but most of the time it's a gap in our fabric. I feel like that exists now. I'm surrounded by military folks, and we're on a mission to honor the highest heroes. So it's a nice fit for me.
How did this mission come into your periphery? How did you become aware of the necessity, or I should say the necessity for this museum and its mission?
Yeah, the organization existed, and they were just in the early stages of fundraising and getting things going. And my SEAL training, my BUD/S classmate and actual swim buddy in BUD/S, like we were physically tied together with a 6-foot rope most of the time. He is now on the board of directors of this foundation, and he knew I was getting out of the military and that they needed some help on the leadership side, just as the organization is getting going. And he reached out and asked if I'd be interested in joining him. And the more I learned about it, and it seemed like a good fit, and so they offered me a job.
Have you had a chance to talk with any Medal of Honor recipients in the course of this mission set for you? And what is your takeaway from what these brave individuals have gone through to have earned that honor?
Yeah, so there's 65 living Medal of Honor recipients today. I've met, I wouldn't say half, but probably 25, maybe approaching 30 of them. Which is just a real treat in and of itself. Learn their stories all the way from there's 2 remaining Korean War Medal of Honor recipients, all the way up to Global War on Terror folks, and a slew of Vietnam veterans. And so it's really interesting to hear their stories, hear their experiences. But what's so fascinating is that all of them say it's harder to wear the medal than it was to earn it. And they're wearing it for their fallen comrades, for their teammates, for the folks that didn't get back, their teammates that lost limbs or whatever. And they're wearing it as a caretaker for the United States of America. And that message, it resonates pretty loudly, and all of them share that message. And it's pretty special to hear.
What kind of challenges do you face in building this type of memorial, this type of honor for Medal of Honor recipients? It seems to me this should be a very quick no-brainer, like, hey, let's build this thing. They should have all the support in the world. But sometimes that is just simply not the case. Can you take us into what challenges you're seeing now and how you plan to overcome them?
Yeah, the challenges that I have in this job are not so much that a rocket's trying to explode underneath me or bad guys are shooting, but it's ones that business folks have all the time, and that's you've got a schedule, you've got budget, you've got constraints and availability of goods, and where construction has started, and cost of things are just more creeping up, and we have to raise all that. As a nonprofit, you have to raise the money to build it. So it's just this sense of urgency to get the funds sooner, so that concrete, steel, glass, and all the things in between just don't keep getting more and more costly, and we can buy it as fast as we can. I think it's healthy, Rod, to be a new guy every now and then. And I had been an astronaut for 17 years, and I felt like I was good at it and knew the profession. And now I'm in managing a small team. I've got a construction. I don't know anything about construction, but there's a really experienced team member that we have that takes care of that. And fundraising is a team effort. But it's a nonprofit, but it's also a non-loss, right? You don't want to operate a business that you're going to lose money. So I'm really getting a great business education, and that all kind of goes back to I think it's healthy to be in learning mode at different phases of our life, and that's the one I'm in right now.
Over the course of your life, including this noble mission to honor these warriors, what is your takeaway? Do you have any takeaways from this career, from all these different career paths you've chosen to take, in terms of advice for people that might be listening? There could be somebody who's, a civilian, or somebody who's maybe thinking about going to the U.S. Naval Academy or any of the other academy. What's your advice to people listening right now?
Yeah, it's really about, this is nothing that's earth-shattering just to me, and people have probably heard this before, but, life is about opportunities and your timing with when they get presented to you, and your decision to take it or not, or, if it's a right fit for me now or not. If I decide this today, what will my view of my decision be in 5 years? And it's all unexpected. And when we kicked this whole thing off, none of it was planned for me. It just kind of happened. And I think the individual has to do their part, like to put out, like in the SEAL teams, we have this saying, just put out, which means give it your all. You're all in today and every day. And just as long as you do that and you can sleep well at night, you gave your best effort. Others will see that, others will appreciate that, and doors will open. Just be a good team player and take opportunities when they present themselves to you. That's about all we can do, right? Like, you can just only control the things that you can control. The rest of it it'll just happen. And how you react, how you adapt, how you thrive or not, that's what's up to you.
Where can folks go to learn more about your organization, how they can get involved?
I didn't hear you, Rod. What was that?
Where can folks go to find out more information about your organization and how they can get involved?
Yeah. So our Medal of Honor Museum Foundation is mohmuseum.org, and there's videos of what the building will look like. We're under construction. We're 6 months in. The concrete's starting to come up out of the ground. There's the Leadership Institute programs we're starting to roll those out so folks can sign up for different programs hosted by Medal of Honor recipients. And so that's all exciting stuff. mohmuseum.org.
Fantastic. And do you have any parting shots, anything we didn't cover that you really want to make sure that people know about or understand?
No, not really. I think we covered it really well. I appreciate your questions. I just love talking to the military community because it's given so much to me, paid for all my education, given me tremendous experiences, and all my best friends in life. So it's just been really fantastic.
Well, Chris, thank you for your service. Thank you for everything you've done for this country. It's very cool. I believe you're the first astronaut I've ever had a chance to have a conversation with. So this is really cool for me. I live here in Tampa. So my wife and I were down in Cape Canaveral about a month ago. And we were there for the Artemis launch, which got scrapped. We were bummed about it. But we took the tour. And as just a civilian, I had no idea how big these structures were. Yeah. You see it on television and it's only as big as your television, right? And you think you have an idea for scope and size. When we saw the launch pad, the Artemis rocket was staged and was ready to go until it got scrapped. And we stared at it. And I remember I looked at her and I said, that's a little scary, right? Like, and I'm not crazy. Like, that's a little, it's a bit terrifying in its sheer magnitude, like the size of this thing. That's a human-made structure. And then they showed us the crawler that takes this thing out. It gave me a newfound appreciation for the work that you guys do, the amount of pressure that has to be on your shoulders every time something's about to launch into space. I mean, that would freak me out. I would be freaked out. like I don't know if I want any part of this.
Yeah. One of my buddies used to say, a lot of people had to not screw up their job today in order for us to live, which I think sums it up perfectly.
That is brilliant. Folks, that was Chris Cassidy, SEAL, astronaut, and president and CEO of the Medal of Honor Museum. Be sure to check out mohmuseum.org to find out more information on how you can support this amazing cause. And while you're cruising the interweb Google tubes, go check out stripes.com, where you can save 50% on your digital subscription to Stars and Stripes. You just got to use the promo code podcast. 50% off when you use promo code podcast. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter, StripesMMPod, and you can find Jack and myself at Jack Murphy RGR and Rod Pod Rod, respectively. Folks, that does it for me. I will see you at the next episode. This episode is brought to you by Sabio, the #1 coding bootcamp for veterans. Visit sabio.la/military to learn more.